Hey, what is up, lovelies? It is Lynn the Gacha Goblin, and today I kind of want to have just a little sit down and talk about kind of like the gacha space right now, which is very, very interesting because lately I've been seeing so many controversial things happening in the space in terms of like how companies are treating their players and how they're becoming more predatory, etc., etc. And before anybody, makes the grand statement of, well, gotcha is gotcha, it's always going to be predatory. Yes, it's always going to be predatory, but at least, there's a line of where you can respect your player base and whatnot and also still get your bag. But that is just how I view things. That might be a very naive way of viewing things, but I also just kind of want to discuss, like, right now, who is the worst company right now? Like, Infold, like the runners up that I have right now are Infold, it's Hoyoverse, it's the new company that's behind Black Beacon, and I kind of just want to break everything down and kind of ask you guys based on your opinion, because I know a lot of people who play Love and Deep Space may not have played any other gachas out there, so you may not understand just how predatory these games can be, or you might be a little bit inexperienced in this, and I kind of want to give you like the overall scope of kind of what we're dealing with in the space right now. So, first and foremost, let's explain these games that I want to talk about today, and let's just go over, a brief little summary of what everything is. So, people might be wondering, what is Black Beacon? Even those who are experienced in playing gacha games may not know this title because this is actually a game that released just last month. So, this game was released on the 10th of April, and it's this just new, like, exploration adventure kind of game where you play as these characters and there's battle and all of these things. And from the trailers, everybody was super hyped about this game. It looked really good. The character design looks pretty awesome. It kind of has that old timey vibe to it, but also that seriousness of like Wuthering Waves in it too. But this game, upon launch, had a very bad launch, and that happens from time to time, basically. But it's how you respond and you kind of pick yourself back up after that failed launch, and apologize to your player base that truly matters, right? So, with Weathering Waves back in the day, when it failed its launch, they gave so many freebies to the player base. They gave so many pulls, they gave so many 5 stars, and it was one of probably the most successful launches in terms of recovering from a faulty launch, right? But Black Beacon did something completely different, and they disrespected completely their global player base. So there's this guy here, Sticks or Bite Sticks. He's also on YouTube. He covers a lot of different gacha games, and he was actually sponsored by Black Beacon to cover the game and to basically, advertise it, right? But when their apology came out in terms of addressing the player base who was upset from the failed launch, they gave a 5 star selector, a free 5 star selector, along with 30 polls to the Chinese player base and not the global player base. They didn't even acknowledge the global players, and that pissed off a lot of people, understandably, right? So if you're trying to, especially since this is a game that just launched, if you're trying to build your following, if you're trying to build a community, you're supposed to treat everybody equally, and yet they purposefully left out the global players, and now everybody's dropping the game. It just launched and everyone's dropping the game because why would you play a game that is basically kind of like, I don't know, it's like there's segregation here. You know what I'm saying? Like, people are calling this company racist. It's really, really bad right now. And if I was playing Black Beacon, which I actually considered playing before, I would be so upset. Like, why would the CN players only get the free 5-star selector and the 30 free pulls? Like, your failed launch affected the global players too, and yet there was no compensation given to the entire player base. So that is how they're handling their little situation here, which is very interesting. I'm watching it from afar, and I'm kind of like seeing whether or not they're going to bounce back from this. But from what I saw earlier, there's actually an event that's happening too. Let me see if I can find it. There's actually an event happening too, that is specifically just for the CN players and not the global players, which is absolutely insane. And it's very disappointing to see that a company is so willing to do that, so blatantly willing to do that. Now, I know a lot of people who, or at least a handful of companies that will kind of like do it, like give you the side eye, like not really pay attention, like how Infold does with its global players. They don't really pay attention to its global players that much, but they're not blatantly like they're not blatantly doing it to their player base. But apparently this company is, and that's what's really frustrating. So that is what's happening with Black Beacon. Let's head over, of course, over to Infinity Nikki. Now, if you haven't seen my video covering the whole shenanigans with the 1.5 update for Infinity Nikki, we know that Infold they said something, went back on their word, did their whole little live stream, got all of the players hyped, and then only to like increase the pity system, to try to cover up some of their mistakes with the socks that they were including in the outfits, to increase the amount of pieces that you need to pull for in the outfits, how crappy the whole story was retconned and all that stuff. Like, Infold did something completely look, granted, they did something completely new, but they did something completely unthinkable to the main story. They completely retconned the main story. So your first experience into playing this game is completely different now, and it's not as engaging. Seriously, it's not as engaging. It doesn't feel cinematic at all, and I just feel so bad for any of the new players coming to Infinity Nikki, and I know a lot of people are actually dropping this game. Actually, here Ufi, who is pretty versed in gacha games, basically said, I'm dropping Infinity Nikki. There's no shortage of good gachas, and I think it's unfair treatment that is going to push a lot of players and CCs away. And I 100% agree. They also said same with Black Beacon. The global community was nothing but supportive and passionate for BB since day one. And the fact that they addressed our concerns is very disheartening and disappointing. Like I said, there's hella gacha games out right now and more coming. If you want to succeed in global, you can't expect us to be okay with unfair treatment. I love BB, but this bad taste in my mouth is going to make me drop it so fast. I 100%, 1000% agree. And like we had a little back, forward and back here, which was really interesting. I was actually talking with Ufi and basically telling her, like, I am so happy that the global player base, or at least, the player base in general for Infinity Nikki is really stepping up. Like, they have more of a united front in terms of fighting Infold and getting something back from Infold and listening to their concerns, because, like I said, they are a united front, whereas with Love and Deep Space, there isn't that united front in terms of the community. We already discussed this before, but people who don't play the EN version of the game have very much called out, our side of the player base and said that, we complain too much, we don't like certain love interests, and like all of the love interests are being pitted against each other. There is so much more divide because of, what was it called? Parasocialism in this community, that we can't become a united front and fight for what we want in Love and Deep Space, which makes it one of the most predatory games because nobody says no to Infold in our game. But at least in Infinity Nikki, people are trying to boycott, trying to change things, trying to stop all of this, like, increased pity and all of that crap. But it is very difficult in terms of Love and Deep Space and our community and trying to fight for change, really fight for change. And then there is Honkai Star Rail. So we have Honkai Star Rail, which is of course a game made by Hoyoverse, right? And they are actually on the top of the Gacha revenue chart. Now, I have said time and time again, the Gacha revenue chart isn't a chart that tells you how well a game is doing. The Gacha revenue is basically telling you how predatory games can actually be. And I kind of want to just explain this to you because it is more on the side that yes, it can be predatory. However, there are certain aspects of the game, especially the size of the population that is playing the game, that can also affect the numbers and all of these things. So please keep that in mind and also take the Gacha revenue with a grain of salt. However, just looking at how fast Love in Deep Space has climbed the rankings and has stayed on top, as opposed to the rest of the other games on the list, it is shocking. It is very, very shocking. So let's talk about Honkai Star Rail here for a second. If you know Honkai Star Rail already, you know that, Casterus was added into the game. Her banner runtime has already ended, but she had a global passive that was added onto her kit that makes it basically like a super buff in terms of adding her onto your team, because even if you don't have her active on your team, she applies that buff where you basically can't die under certain circumstances in the game, and of course that makes it highly appealing for a lot of players. But in the general sense of adding global passives, this will affect the overall gameplay, meaning more new characters who are added into the game. If you don't pull them, it is an immediate negative to your account, no matter how strong your current units are, because Honkai Star Rail kind of formulates all of their endgame modes into making it the most advantageous if you have the newest character. It basically tells you have to pull for these characters or your account will suck. So that is like the quote-unquote test that Honkai Star Rail basically put out, and because they are on the top of the Gacha revenue chart here, they saw how successful Casterus was, and also the anniversary spending contest thingy was, and they made a lot of money off of it, clearly, as we can see. So that just shows that people were willing to do this, and now the company, now Hoyoverse is going to continue adding global passives. They're going to continue doing spending events and all of these things. So yeah, it really depends on how the community reacts to certain games, and reacts to the way that companies basically put out all of this tests, like trials and tests, to see how much they can poke the bear before the bear kind of like fights back and swings back. The bear being us, okay? The bear being the community, the consumers. The company is just poking, seeing how far that they can push us in terms of how far they can make us spend, before we start getting upset. Love in Deep Space is at that point where a large part of the community is upset, but the other half of the community doesn't really care, and that's the CN side, and that's the side that doesn't really play the EN version of the game. Because in terms of, me scrolling through Twitter or me scrolling through Reddit, what I can see from people who post in English, they're not happy with the game state, so they're not happy with how little you can grind in the game, and they're not happy spending so much in Love in Deep Space. But the CN players, as we know, make maybe 97% of the revenue, so they are the ones who should be saying something about not wanting to spend as much, and that is probably the most disappointing part about Love in Deep Space, is that we can't have a united front. But that being said, out of all of the companies that I talked about, out of all of the games that I just mentioned, what do you think is actually the worst? Like, do you think that a company that doesn't pay attention at all to to their global player base and completely ignore them, like Black Beacon's company? Is that the worst, or is Infold the worst for completely changing the story of Infinity Nikki, for raising the pity system, for not listening to its players in Love and Deep Space in this game? Or is Hoyoverse really the top honcho evil here, where they're slowly implementing these characters that are just, overpowering the rest of the older characters, forcing its player bases to spend more money into these newer characters, and just, having spending events and all of these things. Like, who is the worst company? What is the worst tactic that all of these companies have done, basically? Like, in terms of Black Beacon, the part here that shocks me the most is that it is such a new game, right? It is such a new game that they don't even have a large following yet, and yet they're really dissing the global player base. So I'm like, why would you do that? I feel like that's a really silly thing to do, right? In terms of Infinity Nikki, completely changing the game is so crazy to me. The fact that they went from... Look, you gotta scroll down a little bit to find Infinity Nikki here. But Infinity Nikki wasn't doing bad at all. You know what I'm saying? They did 9.9 million last month, and then they did 6.5 million this in April, I guess. April, and then what was it, March? So they did okay. Like, that is still a lot of money, and yet they decided to completely change and overhaul the game. Maybe to make it even more predatory, so that way it will climb the ranks and it would become another cash cow, And then you also have Infold dealing with Love and Deep Space, where they don't listen to the global player base at all. They kind of make you feel like they're listening with all of the surveys that they throw in our faces, but does anything really get changed in the game? Does Silas content get added? Does Caleb content get added? Does the grinding get any better? No. None of those things are being changed. None of things are being, made better in any way, shape, or form. And they don't address anything either. So, is Infold really the worst here? Or is a company like Hoyoverse really the worst? They were the ones who paved the way for open world gacha games, right? They set the standard of what this whole pity system of like 50/50s were, right? They also did a horrible anniversary event for Genshin Impact, 3 polls in 3 years and all of that stuff. That was really bad. And then Honkai Star Rail has these characters, so like, I don't know. I don't know who is the worst gacha company out there. Who is the most predatory? I feel like just from understanding my experience from Love and Deep Space and seeing the crazy changes that the company has made towards Infinity Nikki, I have to say that Infold is pretty bad. Like, they're pretty bad. And it's the managing team, of course. Like, it's the managing team of this entire company that is so money hungry that they're willing to just, bleed us dry of our money. And, yeah, it's just so crazy. Maybe they're thinking to themselves, like, we have to do this now. We have to bleed these people dry now, before competition enters into the market, because once competition enters into the market, there's no way we can make close to $1 billion in the next year. Maybe that's what they're thinking. Maybe that's why they're so predatory. I have no idea. It's really crazy to think about. But you know what? The light at the end of the tunnel in terms of our gaming experience as Love and Deep Space players is that we are just waiting for some sort of competition down the line, and hopefully that will make things a lot better for us. But I do feel like Infold is such a crappy company. And I highly recommend not pulling on the banners until like the last week of the banners. It has saved me so much money these past few runs, and for this multi-banner, I am looking to save a lot more money. I already have 40 something pulls saved, and that's from buying the weekly pass and also the RM pass and doing my dailies every day. So that's not me buying any of the packs or anything like that or topping up. I find that just like the weekly pass and the RM pass are really helpful. So if you're a dolphin and you want to try saving your diamonds, I highly recommend doing that. Because in the long run, giving into FOMO and spending on the day that the banner releases definitely makes you spend way more money than you need to. So I would wait. I would wait. 100% I would wait. But yeah. I think that Infold is really, really a piece of nasty work, to be honest. To be perfectly honest, I think that is where I'm going to stand with that one. Black Beacon, I feel like there's still hope in the company listening to its player base, like its global player base. If they don't, then that truly sucks. But at least they didn't rehaul their entire storyline. Yeah. So there is that, and then Honkai Star Rail and Hoyoverse, like we already know how crazy that game can be because the power creep is insane. But yeah, that is pretty much it. That is all I wanted to talk about. Leave your comments down below. Tell me from your experience what gacha game has been the most predatory that you've experienced. I myself am a quote-unquote tourist in the gacha space, even though my name is the Gacha Goblin. I have played Hoyoverse games, Wuthering Waves, Love and Deep Space, of course, Infinity Nikki, and all of those shenanigans, but I haven't really dived into anything else because, truthfully, the graphics don't really interest me in other gacha games. So that is my opinion. But yeah, leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think is the worst thing that a company can do to its community that makes it super predatory and all of those things, and I think it'll be a really interesting little conversation. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I am Lynn the Gacha Goblin, and I will see you lovelies in the next video. Bye bye now.